Joy to the world, the Lord has come.
Well, good morning, church. Good morning and welcome. So glad you are here. So glad to see all of you. For all of you in the room, welcome. For all of you who are watching online, thank you for joining us for church online today. And let me say as well, Merry Christmas. I hope you're ready as we enter into this season together. And I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you got to see some family and friends. I know our family, we really enjoyed getting to go home for Christmas, and our kids got to see their Nana and their Papa, their Mimi and Papa Joe. And it kind of made me, kind of think, it's interesting, isn't it? Like the names our kids come up with for their grandparents. I don't know how it works in your family. I don't know if you came up with that or your kids came up with that or how that worked out in your life. My kids, one of the things they love to do to give me a hard time, especially at night, sitting around the dinner table, they love to pick on me. And one of the favorite things to do is like come up with the names that one day their kids will call me. And they've got some grand ideas. They want me to call me like Pappy or Gramps or Big Daddy. None of those are working for me. Nothing wrong with those names if that's you, but I'm just hoping for something else when that day comes. Hopefully we have a little while to figure that one out. But it did make me think, what's in a name? What's in a name? I don't know what's going on at your house. We're already setting up for Christmas at our place, and we love that. We love the Christmas season. You may find this hard to believe, but my daughter Emma and I, every morning I take her to school, and since September we've been listening to Christmas music. That's how much we love it. We love to hear it. We love to sing it. We love to play it. In fact, the little video you just saw before I got up here, that was Emma singing "Joy to the World." She's got a beautiful voice, and I love to hear her sing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just awesome, and we love this time of year. We love decorating. We've got, I think, like 7 Christmas trees going up around our house. We've got the snowmen to set up, the reindeer, and you can't forget about Santa, right? Now, there's another guy, am I right, that has a lot of names. That name Santa Claus, that's actually a Dutch name. It refers to St. Nicholas, and St. Nicholas, that's a Greek name referring to the 4th century bishop known for his generosity and kindness. And then you've got that name Kris Kringle, which actually has German origins, and it means Christ child. And you don't want to forget about the French name Pierre Noël, or the Italian name Babbo Natale, both meaning Father Christmas. That guy's got a lot of names. All those names referring to the same person. He's depicted in different ways in different places around the world. But like I know, whenever someone says that name, there's for so many people, there's this sense of joy and hope that come when you hear that name. What's in a name? There's actually a lot that can be in a name. A lot can come with a name. A name can carry a lot of weight. A name can carry a lot of hope. There's certain names, when you hear a certain name, it can bring to mind for you a sense of comfort or peace or well-being. You hear the right name, and it can bring this idea that everything's going to be okay. There's certain names that do, when you hear them, you just have this sense that a new day is coming, a new day is dawning, light has come into a dark situation. A name can bring that kind of joy, that kind of hope, unless you're just in one of those places in life, and we've all been there, and maybe you're there today, where the darkness around you, the darkness surrounding you, the despair that you're feeling is just so great. There's too much grief. There's too much weight. There's too much hardship. There's too many unanswerable questions. There's too many unsolvable problems. But even then, even at the darkest moment, even at your lowest moment, like I know, that even then, when you hear the right name, you can feel a sense of hope. I love watching the old Christmas movies this time of year. And they all follow the same plot line, There's something that's happened. The train has gone off the tracks. There's this climax. It feels like all hope is lost. And then all of a sudden, someone hears it. They hear that name. They find out that you don't have to worry because Santa is on the way. And whenever you hear that name fills your heart with hope. What name is it for you that when you hear that name, your heart is filled with hope? That's right. We'll get there. The problem we're facing, and you get this, is the same problem people have been facing for centuries now, is that there is a real and present darkness that is at work in our world. And I don't have to tell you this, you know this. I do think sometimes it's helpful to be reminded of this, that we have an enemy. He is real. He is relentless. He has nothing to lose, and he has everything to gain. There is a real and present darkness that is at work in this world. And the problem with darkness is that the darkness has left and is leaving a lot of people without hope. That's what darkness does. Darkness leaves people without hope. That's the situation today for a lot of people, maybe in this room, definitely in this world. But that was also the situation some 3,000 years ago when this man arrived on the scene by the name of Isaiah, and he was a prophet of God. And he began looking around at the world he was living in, and he began to describe the situation as he saw it. And I want you to hear what Isaiah writes. I'll start in Isaiah chapter 8, verse 20. Listen to how he describes the world, the darkness within the world in which he was living some 3,000 years ago. He said, look to God's instructions and teachings. He's talking to the people of Israel. Look to God's instructions and teachings. People who contradict his word are completely in the dark. Think about that. They will go from one place to another, weary and hungry, and because they are hungry, they will rage and curse their king and their God. They will look up to heaven and down at the earth, but wherever they look, there will be trouble and anguish and dark despair. They will be thrown out into the darkness. The people of God, at this point in the story, they had completely and totally turned away from God. And because of this, Isaiah says they are completely in the dark. Not only are they in the dark, they are facing trouble. They are facing despair. They are facing anguish unlike anything they've ever faced before. In a word, they are without hope. That's the situation as Isaiah sees it. But he continues to write, and he continues to prophesy, and he continues to speak to the people. And listen to what he says in the very next verse, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 1. He says, nevertheless, that time of darkness and despair will not go on forever. The land of Zebulun and Naphtali will be humbled, but there will be a time. There's going to be a time in the future when Galilee of the Gentiles, which lies along the road that runs between the Jordan and the sea, will be filled with glory. Because of the disobedience of the people, because they had turned away from God, because they had forgotten God, because they had begun to worship idols and worship anything and everything other than God, because they had been unfaithful to God, even though God had been faithful to them, even though God had given them miracle after miracle after miracle to remind them of who he was and the power that he held within his hands and that he was with them and that he was for them. Still, somehow, some way, these people had turned away from God. And because of that, Isaiah says, you're going to experience a darkness and despair unlike anything you've ever known before. And that's what was happening right now, right here in this moment. They're living in the promised land, but they're living under the oppression of the Assyrian Empire. Their land has been invaded. Their friends, their family members have been defeated, and they've been killed, or they've been carried off into captivity and slavery. They are living in complete and total and utter darkness and despair. They're living without hope. Yet, Isaiah arrives on the scene as a prophet of God, and he begins in the middle of this darkness and despair. He begins talking about, describing like this future time, this day that is coming, this day that is on the way in the not too distant future, when this land that is currently under a curtain of darkness and despair is going to be filled with a glory. And if you're living in that day and time, if you're hearing Isaiah speak these words, you literally can't comprehend what he's saying. It makes no sense. You're looking around at the same situation he's looking at, and you're shaking your head in agreement when he's describing the darkness and despair. But he just lost you when he starts talking about a coming day and a future where there is light. What's he talking about? That's the question everyone's asking. What could he possibly be describing? When everywhere we look, all we see is darkness and despair. There's trouble around every corner. There is no hope in sight. And I just wonder if you've ever been there. If you've ever felt like everywhere you look, all you see is darkness and despair. It's that moment when you don't want to check your text messages. You don't want to open your email. You don't want to answer your phone because you know as soon as you do, all you're going to hear about are more problems, more issues, more unsolvable and unanswerable questions. And you know that in this moment, there just really isn't any hope. And even if there was, even if something was going to change, even if there was any hope of it getting better somehow, it's not going to happen anytime soon. And if you've ever been there, if you've ever felt that, maybe you're feeling that today, I want you to hear the same words that the prophet Isaiah speaks to Israel when they're up against the darkest darkness they have ever experienced. Here's what Isaiah says in verse 2. He says, the people who walk in darkness, they will see a great light. For those who live in a land of deep darkness, a light will shine. And you might hear those words and you might wonder like they wondered how that's even possible. Especially if you're in the middle of a broken relationship. Maybe it's a fractured marriage. Maybe it's a broken relationship with a son or with a daughter, with a parent, with a grandparent. Maybe it's a broken relationship with a friend or another family member. You're going through the middle of a difficulty with someone that you love deeply, and yet it feels like no matter what you do, you can't do anything right. The situation just feels hopeless. You may wonder how that's even possible, especially if you feel trapped in some kind of addiction or some kind of habitual sin. You've tried everything you know to get out of it, whatever it is for you. And maybe you've experienced, like some people have experienced, freedom for an hour or freedom for a day or maybe a week or maybe even a month, maybe even longer. But before you know it, you found yourself right back in the middle of that deep, dark pit. And you don't know how to get out of it again. You're not sure if you can. You might wonder how it's even possible, especially if you feel like so many of us feel like the life that you're living is just overwhelming. The plates you're trying to spin and keep spinning, they are just too many. And in fact, if you want to be really honest with yourself, more often than not, those plates aren't spinning, they're falling. And you feel like you're letting people down. You feel like you're letting yourself down. You just can't keep up with the pressure, the anxiety, the all of it is mounting against you. You feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. You get to the end of every day feeling more exhausted than you did the day before, and you're not sure how that's even possible. And now you can't even remember the last time you smiled, or you laughed, or you just had a good day. You might wonder how that's possible, especially if the cancer's back, or the illness is worse than you imagined. The prognosis isn't what you were expecting. The test results were different than you hoped. The medicine's not working. The insurance isn't cooperating. You're praying for a miracle, but nothing seems to be working. You're not even really sure if God is even listening. You may wonder how it's even possible for people who are walking the road you're walking. How could anyone like you? How could anyone who's going through what you're going through, who's experiencing the valley of the shadow of death, darkness unlike anything you've ever known before, how could anyone who's going through what you're going through, who's walked in your shoes, have any hope of seeing a great light? Isaiah says there is a reason to hope, but the reason he gives is not the reason anyone expected then, and it's probably not the reason you would expect today. Here's the reason that Isaiah says the people of Israel, living in one of the darkest times the world has ever known, this is why they have reason to hope, and it's the same reason, by the way, you can have hope as well. Verse 6, Isaiah says this, "For a child is born to us, a son is given to us. The government will rest on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." The reason they could have hope, the reason you can have hope today is, well, it's because of a child. Now, you know, like I know, that the children, when children are born, when children come, they bring a little bit of hope into any situation. But this child is not like any other child. And by the way, the darkness they were facing, it wasn't like any other kind of darkness they had ever faced before. This child that would be born, this son that would be given, would have the ability to carry the weight of the government of the universe on his shoulders. And don't miss that. Don't downplay that. Don't misunderstand that. It's not like he's going to come and he's going to be able to be the next president of a nation or the next emperor of an empire. That's too small a thing for him. This is the King of the universe we're talking about, the King of kings, the Lord of lords. And literally the weight of the government of the universe is on his shoulders. He is the King of kings, the Lord of lords. All power and authority belong to him. The psalmist would describe him this way: he is robed in majesty and armed with strength. His throne was established from before time began. He is the great King above all kings. In his hand are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks, you know what? They belong to him. The sea is his. You know why? Because he made it. His hands formed the dry land. He alone is great and worthy to be praised. And Isaiah tells us his name. You know his name? This is his name. His name is Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And you may think that's 4 names. And you're not wrong. In English, it appears that way, but did you know in the original language, this is just 1 name? This is the throne name of the one who will come and bring light that will shine in the darkness. This is the throne name of the one who comes and brings everlasting hope. This is the throne name of the one who comes and reverses the curse of darkness and despair. This is the name of the Son who is given, who will come to make all things right and all things new. What is his name? His name is Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And you may wonder, like, who could possibly live up to this name? Like, who is coming who could possibly be worthy of this name? I'm so glad you asked. Fast forward some 700 years, there's another guy by the name of Matthew, and he's writing a story about this rabbi named Jesus of Nazareth. And I want you to hear what Matthew writes about him. I'll start in Matthew chapter 4, verse 12. Matthew says this: "When Jesus heard that John had been arrested, he left Judea and he returned to Galilee. He went first to Nazareth, then he left there and he moved to Capernaum beside the Sea of Galilee in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali." And then Matthew says this fulfilled what God said through the prophet Isaiah. "In the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, beside the sea, beyond the Jordan River, in Galilee where so many Gentiles lived, the people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. And for those who lived in the land where death cast its shadow, a light has shined." And from then on, Jesus began to preach, "Repent of your sins and turn to God, for the kingdom of heaven is near." The one Isaiah was speaking of all those years ago, that child who would be born, the son who would be given, the hope who was on the way. His name is Jesus. He is our wonderful counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. His name is hope. And I wonder today, do you know this hope? Do you know this hope? 1861 was a particularly dark time in our country, in our nation, in our history. That year was the year that the Civil War began. A year later, a young man by the name of Charles Appleton Longfellow walked out of his family's home on Brattle Street in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He didn't tell anybody he was leaving, didn't tell anybody where he was going, but he went that day and he boarded a train for Washington, D.C. He would travel some 400 miles along the eastern seaboard, where he would join Lincoln's Union Army and fight in the Civil War. Charlie was the oldest of 6 kids. Less than 2 years earlier, he had lost his mom. She was in their home when her dress caught on fire. Her husband, Henry, was sleeping, taking a nap, and when he woke up, hearing all the commotion, he did everything within his power to put out the flames. He threw himself onto his wife, trying to put out the fire, and in the process, his face was badly burned and disfigured by the fire. By the time he got the flames out, his wife's body had been so severely burned. She survived the night, but she passed away early the next morning. Fast forward 2 years later, Charlie's run away to fight in the war. By the time Henry figured out what has happened, he begins writing letters to every person who's in power, every person who has influence that he knows, hoping against hope that somehow his letters can reach the right people at the right time, and maybe his son Charlie can be made an officer or something, like somehow, some way, his son can avoid having to fight on the front lines. But by the time those letters reached the right people, it was too late. Charlie had already impressed his superiors with his skills as a soldier. In April of 1863, Charlie fought bravely in the Battle of Chancellorsville in Virginia. But shortly after that battle, he became ill with typhoid fever. They sent him home to recover, and he did. His father cared for him and took care of him, and slowly but surely he got better. But during that time, he missed out on the Battle of Gettysburg. He was wanting to get back to his troops, wanting to get back to his brothers in arms, and sure enough, he did. He rejoined his regiment. And then on November 27th of 1863, Charlie was a part of the battle at Mine Run Canyon when he was shot in the left shoulder. He missed being paralyzed by about an inch. He was taken back home to recover. And his father took him in and trying to nurse his son back to health. He just lost his wife 2 years before. He's trying as hard as he could not to lose his son. His face has been burned and badly disfigured. He can hear the cannonballs being fired in the distance. He's got 6 kids he's trying to take care of and provide for all on his own. I mean, this day, it's about as dark a day as you could possibly imagine. But this day wasn't just any day. This day was Christmas Day, 1863. And on that day, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow heard something else in the distance. He heard church bells ringing. And when he heard those bells, he began to wonder, in the middle of the darkness and despair that he was facing, was there any reason to hope? And with that question in mind, he began to write the words to this now familiar poem. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And thought how, as the day had come, the belfries of all Christendom had rolled along the unbroken song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Till ringing, singing on its way, the world revolved from night to day, a voice, a chime, a chant sublime of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then from each black, accursed mouth, the cannon thundered in the south, and with the sound, the carols drowned of peace on earth, goodwill to men. It was as if an earthquake rent the hearthstones of a continent and made forlorn the households born of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair, I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then pealed the bells, more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men. Church, there is hope. We have hope, and we know his name. His name is Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And whatever darkness you're up against today, whatever valley of the shadow of death you're walking through today, here's what I want to remind you of. Here's what I want you to remember. There is a light that outshines the darkness. The Apostle John would say it this way: the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. And I wonder today if you would allow that light that shines into the darkness to restore and renew and refresh your hope today. And if you know that hope, if you've experienced that hope, if you've walked through the valley of the shadow of death and you've experienced the witness of God, the presence of God, the goodness of God in your life, would you take that hope that you carry, the name that you know that brings hope, that gives hope, and would you share that hope with someone else who's walking through their own valley of the shadow of death, going through their own darkness and despair? Would you take that hope and share that hope and tell them our hope has a name. What is his name? His name is Wonderful Counselor. His name is Mighty God. His name is Everlasting Father. His name is Prince of Peace. His name is Hope. His name is Jesus.